first 6 months of 2015 have certainly seen a serious turnaround in the European economy. And after such a long time of recession and really sluggish growth, that's a great thing to see. Of course, optimism can sometimes get out of hand, but I do think there are very serious reasons to believe that things have finally turned around. The most important is the European Central Bank, which is now very clearly pushing loose policy. That's pushed the euro down, which has helped a lot of European firms. Beyond that, the banking union, nascent as it is, the supervisory oversight has forced banks to clean up. There's less self-defeating daft austerity policy, and the fruits of structural reform are beginning to become clear. That said, Europe's got a lot of very tough problems. Its demography, its structural rigidities, so it ain't going to become the most vibrant part of the world economy overnight, but certainly things are looking better than they were. The European economy has a lot of problems. Some of them are very hard to address. Its demography isn't so great. Europe's populations are aging very fast. That will demand a lot of structural reform to get people to work longer. Productivity growth is slow. That's also because of a very highly regulated economy in some countries. The single market is really there in name only in many areas. We could do with a lot bigger push to create a single market, particularly in services. But of course, the European economy is also suffering from the headwinds of the euro crisis, a very high debt burden in some countries, a very fragmented financial system still. All of these things make it hard to grow fast. Compared to where we have been in the past few years, I think European companies have every reason to be more optimistic. Depends a little bit on where they are in Europe. It's much easier to be optimistic in Germany or indeed in Spain than it is in Greece. And it depends, of course, what sector they're in. But broadly, Europe is in a much better place than it was, and you see that in the optimism of European companies. I'm actually less optimistic about global growth than I am relative to where it was about European growth. The reason is that for the past few years, we have assumed the big engine of global growth would be rapid growth in the emerging markets. The emerging markets have slowed, their structural growth rates are slower. The big reason for optimism is still the US, the world's largest economy, which does seem to have finally put the shadows of the financial crisis behind it, and I think is in reasonably good shape. So I'm reasonably confident about the US. I think the euro area is looking much better than it was, but the emerging markets, which are now, of course, increasingly important, I've seen a secular slowdown from where they were. So overall, I think global growth is going to be relatively lackluster. The interesting thing for companies is how to navigate this quite complicated future where you're not clear where exactly the growth is going to come from. It's much too broad brush now to talk about the emerging markets as a group. There are some emerging markets that have huge potential. I'd point to India, for example, an economy that is accelerating with Narendra Modi now, has a reform momentum, has a very young population. Clearly, China is still a very large market, depends on what you're in, but the economy there is slowing sharply. There are some countries which have been serial disappointments. Brazil would be high among them. But even in the advanced world, there are some serious opportunities. I'd look to the US, which has clearly put the shadows of the financial crisis behind it. And even in Europe, growth is a more sedate pace, but there are opportunities there too. I have no doubt that overall the European economy has turned a corner. It won't be a smooth road going forward. There'll be bumps on the way. Some countries will still face a lot of turmoil, but overall things are much better than they were. That means there are opportunities, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing where those opportunities are and how companies are going to take advantage of them at our Euro Finance conference in Copenhagen in September.